Okay, hello everybody. Today's date is October 12th, 2021, and my name is Leslie Williams. Now, check this out. Assuming for a minute that the crime of gang stalking does not continue to interrupt my cell phone signal or whatever that it is that they're doing, that is preventing my videos from uploading, which I tried to upload one video at 3 places 2 days ago, and they would not even begin to upload. No, I take that back. Twice they said 1% uploaded after 20 minutes. Now, one of the biggest ways to unlock the truth about the crime of gang stalking, which is nothing but a criminal program widely, massively reported to be hosted by all USA intelligence agencies, state, county, and local police, fusion centers. The U.S. military is also implicated, and many others who are working together as an up and operating national organized crime syndicate within the system, tentacled out within every community within the United States. Every community. Okay? So, do you honestly think, just consider this and consider this well. And by the way, let's see if anything stops this video from recording before I say thank you for listening. Have a good day. So check this out. Do you honestly think, when you research the crimes that are occurring in gang stalking crimes connected to remote neural monitoring, and I mean when you extensively research remote neural monitoring to this crime with a patient, mature posture, and I'm not just talking about a month of research, I'm talking about months of research, okay? Because trust me when I say what's going on alone just with remote neural monitoring is massive. You're going to be able to determine the extreme sophistication of it. So if they can neurally hack the brain and biological systems from a distance down to the photonic signal processing of neurotransmitters, do you honestly think for 1 minute that these same sadistic, depraved, demented, demonic horrors cannot hack and jam your cell phone signal? The only way we're going to know truth, my fellow American citizens, concerning this crime is by and through, especially listening to victims who are massively educated and who are also massively experienced. I'm going to make this statement as well, because if any gang stalking victim ever watches, no matter what date they might watch this video, and if they've only been targeted for a month or a day or a year, I don't want the public to think that their testimony is any less important than a target who's been targeted for 10 years or more, and or an extremely educated victim. Of course not, because every second of their suffering is equal to a target suffering who's been enduring this crime for a decade or more. What I am saying, though, is that when you first become... Let me just wrap this up, because I don't want to get bogged down into this detail here. When you've been researching this crime for 10 years, you're going to know more material than someone who's only been researching it for a month or even a year. So that's basically what I mean. You're going to really be able to unlock the massive truth faster by researching what extremely educated gang stalking victims expose. And most of those victims have been victims for 10 years or more. So, but you need to know every consonant, every vowel, every noun of every gang stalking victim is equally as important, because all victim suffering is equally, okay, important as any other victims, okay, and their testimony, okay, concerning it. So let me dive right into the subject matter of this video, because what I want to do in this video is I don't know if I'm going to make it, I don't know if this is going to be a, hold on, oh, excuse me, I don't know if this is going to be a two-part video series or not. We'll just kind of see how much I can get out in this one, because my phone, usually my SD cards only allow me to make 33-minute long videos at a time. So now, concerning this particular make and model phone. So, let me just kind of, start talking about the subject matter. Now, you should go get a pen and piece of paper, so I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Do it right now, okay? And, okay, so my fellow American citizens, the crime of gang stalking is actually a program. It's not stalking by gangs at all. Hold on. The gang stalking means more than one person, and it can mean up to 50 to 75 people, okay? Even when one person is used against a target physically, that person has still already colluded with someone who's using him, and will probably end up conferencing them with them after an event that they stage, because they want to be able to, my mind's eye is telling me that they want to be able to reassure the person they use that nothing's going to happen to them, possibly get any information from them that they might not have been able to ascertain through any forms of sophisticated surveillance as the event unfolded. So that one person will be conferencing with another person. So the gang of gang stalking is at least two people. The vast majority of the time, though, it's a lot more. And that's usually associated to the community-based harassment connected to gang stalking crimes, where the community is literally used to apply gang stalking techniques around the target, concerning the target, and at times directly towards the target. And their techniques and methods are many. So that should have gave you enough time to go get a pen and piece of paper. And while you were up getting one, you really didn't miss too much of what I stated. And since we're still pretty early into the video, all you got to do is go back and take a look at what was said during those 35 seconds. Okay, so what I want to do in this video is I want to drop some information to you. So you can write down, you should write down these descriptions and then research the descriptions. Research the data from the descriptions, and then you're going to be able to correlate all the different data from the different descriptions together, just like putting a puzzle together, in order to be able to see the whole, a good representation of the good pictorial representation in your mind pertaining to the subject matter disclosed. Remember, gang stalking is a program, it's a construct that is constructed and put on and enforced and affected upon a victim's life, every aspect of their life, every aspect of it, and their brain and body. Okay? It's the most sadistic, depraved, demented, demonic crime that has ever, literally, been perpetrated against the entire human family in the entire history of the human family. Trillions of dollars have went into the development of this program and the execution of it and the protection of it over the decades and counting. So trust me when I say this is not no joke. So I'm going to discuss in this video some things with you to help you understand some of the things that gang stalking does. And the exposure is actually going to be for the benefit of victims, but since anybody can be picked in this program at anywhere at any time, and it isn't at the epidemic level in America. Oh, absolutely. In every single neighborhood, town, city, county, and state in the United States. It's everywhere. In every environment that you can think of, it is literally everywhere. So, and it's got a lot of very good camouflaging techniques applied to it, which is why it's everywhere, yet most people don't even know about it. So just hear me out. So this information is good for a person who's not targeted, or not targeted yet. Okay, so here what I'm going to do right now is make some statements that you can kind of view as a preliminary foundation, and then as I continue to talk, my statements will kind of build on that foundation, and then as I continue to talk, you'll see the subject matter. So in gang stalking crimes, one of the biggest things that is employed against all gang stalking victims are three basic techniques. But make no mistake about it, there are many, 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 many more. The three basic techniques that the victim endures through the community-based harassment is the sensitization method, the direct conversation method, and dark neurolinguistic programming, DNLP for short. But you should also know some of the other main methods that are perpetrated in gang stalking crimes against the victim are sound technologies, and what is done by and through not just the sound technologies, but how those sound technologies are also working in an integrated way with remote neural monitoring and remote neural influencing. So trust me when I say those statements right there alone are massive, and you'll understand how they're massive when you do the extensive research. But this makes up about 40% of the program, even though those statements are made within a minute and a half. It makes up about 40% of the program And many of the applied methods and techniques and tactics, okay, are camouflaged to make it look like it's just harassment, or somebody's being picked on, or somebody's being bullied, or somebody's being blacklisted maybe because of something they did. No, 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 no. Do not assume that in any measure. So hear me out. Now, let's talk about for a minute the sensitization method of gang stalking. I'll mention a few things that are done to gang stalking victims in order to make them sensitive to a specific sound, word, phrase, physical gesture, and trust me, you'll see how relevant this is as I continue to talk. So it doesn't matter how this initially sounds, stay with me and you'll see it. Okay, now just hold on 1 second. Okay, so some of the main things that are reported to be done towards a gang stalking victim, which means that what they see and what they hear is being intentionally manipulated and forced for them to see and hear things that are done through the community-based harassment. Now, we'll talk about the sensitization method, and I'm going to start talking fast because I've already went through 11 minutes in this video so far, and I still got a lot to dump. So, part of the sensitization method is where these psychotic rats who are hosting this crime, and then the local managers that are used to make sure that the amount of community-based, the amount of community members can be used against the victim to employ the method I'm getting ready to discuss in about less than a minute. Those are the main responsible parties for what ends up happening to the victim. Because the sensitization method of gang stalking, the dark neurolinguistic programming techniques of gang stalking, the direct conversation method of gang stalking is about visual and auditory brain treatment. Absolutely. And monitoring and heterodyning. And also, when these three specific techniques are employed, the victim produces a lot of negative thinking responses and emotional responses because the brain and body is being induced to experience them through the abuse through these three techniques. So, as the body and brain is processing things, remote neural monitoring is monitoring the brain and body's reaction to these applied techniques and is harvesting the data. Heterodyning, emotional cluster frequencies, EEG signature frequencies, electrophysiological signals, electrical chemical signals. It's identifying them. Some of them they're literally harvesting for later heterodyning. And you'll understand that as you continue to stay with this video series and this video account. Trust me. Because I tell things in layman's terms. Many educated victims tell things in layman's terms because they're at the educated level to where they know that if they got off into the scientific and mathematical aspects of the sophistication of what's actually going on, the average layman person would not be able to understand it. I mean, you'd have to go through textbooks and textbooks and textbooks just to be able to teach yourself the math to be able to see it. Okay? So just trust me on that. We've done the research, we've broken it down into layman's terms, and then we present it in a way to where you can see it with your mind's eye as much as you need to, okay? And then you'll still be, so then you will be able to walk away with an educated knowledge concerning what's actually going on and why. So when the sensitization method of gang stalking is employed around the target concerning the target, and I'll give you a few examples of what that means. So, one of the few of the sensitization methods that are done to gang stalking victims is where people will be propped up around the victim to wear specific color coding. Red, black and white, blue and white, black, sometimes purple, sometimes orange, but mostly red, black, blue and white, black and white. And then they'll even try and sensitize you to red and white and a bunch of different other types of patterns of colors. Now, that's mostly being done for the sake of remote neural monitoring using nanotech that is in the brain of the victim. And the nanotech acts as a bioamplifier. It is positioned to flow along the synaptic gaps as neurotransmitters are processing along the synaptic gaps, and the neurotransmitters is what's processing the experience. So when somebody is propped up around you and they're repeating a identical word and phrase you've been sensitized to while they're wearing color coding, that's auditory and visual and brain entrainment. So, but with the way the brain processes information, if you were to go to a hospital, okay, and hook yourself up and you had a doctor hook you up to an EEG machine, and he got out a bunch of place cards. You know, those kind of cards that you would hold up. And on these place cards would be patterns of colors. Checkers, black and white checkers, black and white stripes, black and white wavy lines. Your brain would create a very similar, identical EEG pattern readout. Okay? Because the brain is processing identical patterns. Okay? That's what the color coding is about. The visual color coding is about. It's about using your brain to process the patterns of what's being seen, so that when the brain is processing it, the nanotech that is positioned to flow between the synaptic gaps of the neuronal processes as the neurotransmitters are processing the visual imagery. And what the nanotech does is it acts as a bioamplifier, so that it can amplify the frequency signals from the neurotransmitters as they're flowing across the synaptic gap. As a direct result, they're able to capture that exact neurotransmitter frequency. And this is where the heterodyning comes into play at, and this is also plays a big role in the entrainment of neural pathways and neural networks, which is why gang stalking victims are all over the internet saying that every day they're experiencing the same exact identical patterns of behaviors that are propped up around them concerning them. And what is propped up are the applied techniques of gang stalking. The direct conversation method, the sensitization method, and the dark neuralistic programming. Okay? And the sensitization technique can include audio and visual. Okay? If you take a thorough look at remote neuromonitoring crimes and gang stalking crimes, you will see that some of the biggest, you will see that some of the most biggest reported things that are being done with remote neuromonitoring in gang stalking crimes is pattern recognition and propping up things that are opposite too, so that when the brain compares the data, the context of the of what's propped up. Okay, hold on one second. See, the brain, when the brain is presented with one thing, it identifies it. Especially if there's a pattern connected to it. But then when the brain identifies something that's completely opposite to what they usually are being forced to witness, the brain is going to analyze that too. Because you got to understand something about the brain. Gang stalking crimes intentionally induce paranoia. Because anybody who's a stalking victim is going to be concerned about why it's occurring. But in gang stalking, it's a crime that forces you to notice that you're being tracked, surveilled, harassed, even intimidated, even assaulted, including brutal assaults, which can include rapes. It's a crime that forces you to intentionally know it's being propped up. Okay? So they know that's going to excite the limbic system, which is the most primitive part of the brain responsible for survival and self-preservation. And this crime knows all of this. It's part of the main reason why a lot of the things that are propped up are intentionally propped up to look threatening. Okay, concerning like when they prop up somebody who's wearing tattoos and his pants hanging half off his ass, and he's walking in a punkish type way, and he's smoking a cigarette in a punkish type way. And trust me when I say, they'll prop these people up just to have them intentionally behave that way, in order to convey that message that, okay, I know I'm being gang stalked and he looks like a gang member. That's literally how bad this crime is. Because they want you to notice these attributes, these visual attributes, because they assist in conveying that fear. Okay? And, oh, absolutely, because remember, stalking generates fear in anybody who's being stalked. But gang stalking, it's a crime that literally, intentionally, purposely forces you to notice it. Every day, everywhere you go, if you're being subjected to massive community-based harassment connected to this crime. Okay? Now, the victim usually ends up becoming aware that it's role-playing at some point in their targeting. And so, a lot of that fear injection is harder for the perpetrators to achieve in the victim. But you gotta also remember, though, when a victim is being shown things that are being intentionally propped up, their brain can be manipulated to feel fear, heterodyne fear. Okay, so go to Google and research at Google. Ex-CIA scientist Dr. Robert Duncan, The Matrix Deciphered, heterodyning emotional cluster frequencies on one person and then putting them on another. Trust me, this is all over the internet, so it doesn't matter what you believe when you hear me say these things. It's occurring. Okay? Oh, there's books been written about it. It's been discussed on national radio shows, including ones I've been on. Okay? So, the point here is that gang stalking, see, in order for the nanotech that is in a person's brain, that's in a gang stalking person's brain, once it's put there, you got to understand why it's put there. It's put there as an interpreter. Okay? Because if you went to a hospital and hooked yourself up to an EEG machine and the doctor showed you a bunch of cards of facial expressions, physical gestures, okay, color patterns, your brain, okay, would be able to produce on the EEG machine certain specific, somewhat very similar, identical EEG responses pertaining to the amplitude of that's coming from the interpretation of how the brain is interpreting it as it's processing it. But an EEG machine has massive limitations. So if you want to go to Google and type in at Google EEG readouts, visual and auditory stimuli, and do some real good extensive research into that, you'll eventually find a few articles online that will literally openly tell you that EEG machines are very limited in their capacity to interpret the most minute contextual detail of everything that is propped up in one gang stalking prop. Okay? Because you got to remember, when the brain is seeing something, it's analyzing it. It's looking at all aspects and variables to it. And you should also know that when a gang stalking victim is forced to see a visual stimuli, as they're seeing that stimuli, their brain can be experiencing V2K with voice morphing in order to add meaning to that stimuli, while the brain can be forced to endure heterodyne fear. Because in the creation of neurally entrained pathways to a stimuli, which then can also become neural-entrained neural networks, they want the brain to be able to have these additional things on it. A visual and auditory brain entrained neural pathway is more valuable to them than just a visual pathway, entrained pathway, or an auditory entrained pathway. Okay? So if you can create a visual and auditory neural network with emotions onto it, which means emotional clusters that are firing, then what you have here is a neural network. Now, I'm going to be making a second video because there's a lot to still be exposed, and I can see it's not going to happen in this one. So just the second video will be titled the same as this one, and the title will be Gang Stalking, Remote Neural Monitoring, Pattern Recognition. So you'll know when you're in the right video when you go into the account, in case the second video is not titled yet. I mean, not titled right away after I upload it. So the nanotech that is pre-programmed before it even goes into the victim's brain, it's pre-programmed. What it does is that it travels along the brain's specific. See, because you can have the brain already, this crime can already entrain certain neural pathways. Hold on a second. Long before they put the nanotech in you. Okay? And I have a feeling the reason why that's done is because they want to be able to create some entrained pathways and neural networks and then reinforce them through the continued repetition of the same exact identical things that are propped up, so that remote neural monitoring can harvest the potentiated frequency output from them. Once that potentiated frequency output from it is identified, they can then pre-program the nanotech. So that when the nanotech goes into the system and then that entrained pathway is stimulated by and through repropping up the stimuli that's associated to it, that potentiated frequency output fires, and then nanotech is pre-programmed to look for it. It then starts to travel along the synaptic gaps of that entrained pathway, and then it starts to act as a biodecoder for the more complex attributes of the props when they're propped up. Absolutely. So, one of the main goals of these satanic, depraved, sadistic, freaked out, criminally insane animals who host this crime is brain entrainment of neural pathways, neural networks, including creating these types of pathways to disassociated states, to the limbic system, because it's much easier to remotely neurally influence a mind with voice to skull and voice morphine, and stimulated brain states that can also be stimulated through remote neural monitoring, heterodyne emotions that can be placed on a victim when the victim is in a disassociated state. Because when you're in a disassociated state, the only real thing that's active at that time is the limbic system and the disassociated state, meaning that it's very hard to engage in logical, critical thinking in real time when they're staging an event against you that's got a stimuli that's attached to an entrained pathway that's connected to a disassociated state. That's why that gives a lot of credence to a lot of the testimonies of gang stalking victims who are stating that when they stage an event, they'll stage an event really fast because they don't want the brain to recall any educated knowledge in real time as the events occur, because that educated knowledge will get in the way of neural influencing done through V2K and voice morphine and any type of heterodyne things that are put on the victim's brain as they're experiencing the event in order to trick the brain. Like if you can trick somebody into believing that you're really angry when your normal natural anger to this type of event would be at like number 3, but if they heterodyne emotional cluster frequencies of extreme anger taken from another victim and put it on the gang stalking victim and then stimulate it when that staged event's going on, then the victim will start experiencing extreme anger, okay, and extreme anxiety. The victim will believe that it's the natural feeling based on the current event, and then they use voice to skull with voice morphine to trick the victim into believing that the decisions that they're going to act on during the event are their own, so they can set the victim up. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, see, because what we're dealing with here is mass murdering, human trafficking, raping, gang raping animals. And the only way they can get a hold of you to exploit you is through brain entrainment, staged events, and neural influencing. So if you went to a hospital and a doctor showed you 30 cards, 30 different picture cards, people putting their hands to their face, their mouth, their nose, people putting their hand on their stomach, people wearing certain color-coded clothes, and then he showed you each one of these 30 cards 90 times, your brain will literally become visually brained and trained to those physical gestures and to those color-coded patterns. But you see, in gang stalking crimes, when they stage an event and they have these types of and then when they use these type of people for the staged event, and those people are told to engage in specific types of physical gestures that the doctor showed the patient on the card, while they're wearing color-coded clothes, or carrying something that's been sensitized, that that's got color coding that the victim's been sensitized to, then when they're staging an event and they're engaging in the physical gestures and they're wearing the color coding, you got to remember there's other things going on in the staged event, like things that are said, physical actions that are extremely suggestive to be hostile and increasingly hostile. All right, so when the victim is enduring the event from A to Z, while they can also be experiencing voice to skull with voice morphine and or any stimulated emotions, brain states, or heterodyne emotions onto the victim, they're forcing the brain to deal and process all this for at least one motive, but there can be many, like to set the victim up. But the main motive is so that the nanotech that is in the brain acts as a bioamplifier for the neurotransmitters as they're processing every minute detail of the event. An EEG machine readout cannot do that. An EEG machine readout does not have the capacity. An EEG machine does not have the capacity to accurately produce the accurate readout of the brain processing every minute detail of the staged event in a contextual way, because each minute detail has it's processed along the synaptic gap okay, which is part of the entrainment. They want to see how the brain is interpreting the act, okay, and how the brain processes it, how the neurotransmitters process it, okay, because it's brain mapping, but it's also brain entrainment. Now, since I don't know these satanic rats that are hosting the crime against me, it's hard for me to. They could get on a bus and sit across from me on a bus, and I would not know it. They could get on the bus and spark up a conversation with me. I would not know that it would be them because they're total strangers to me. So I said that because you need to realize there's a lot going on their end that I'm not familiar with because I'm not them. So I can't sit back and say that these are their exact identical to a T motives when it comes to other things that they're doing, which is why they would be staging the events. You know, like what type of experimental work, what kind of data deciphering are they? I mean, how much of it is being done concerning other issues related to data and brain deciphering? Because I'm not them. You know, I'm me, I'm the victim. So I've never sat in a room with them and said, well, we want to do this because of that and this and that. Okay? I'm basically talking to you about things that I've become educated about, buying through people who have talked to the scientists, like Dr. Robert Duncan, who helped develop some of this technology, who's all over the internet exposing it as well. Okay, because he states that he did not know what this technology was going to be used for, and I believe him. Personally, I believe him. Okay, and he's pissed off about it too, and I don't blame him one bit. Okay, so you know, when we look at gang stalking, when a victim when a brain entrained neural pathway and neural network has been created in the brain based on the props, and I'm aware that I didn't get into a lot of extensive detail about the props, so that's going to have to, I'll start massively diving into that once the 33-minute, 9-second mark has come up. Hold on a second. Now, if this turns out to be a video file that's longer than 33 minutes and 9 seconds, because I'm noticing some of my SD cards are doing that on occasion, instead of it starting a second video, once it reaches 33 minutes and 9 seconds, it will just continue to record and end up being a 1 hour and 7 minute long video. If that's the case, you should still always remember that most of my SD cards only create 33-minute and 9-second videos at a time, which is why I say in most of my videos that this could be a video series, and so look out for video 2, you know, in the YouTube channel that this one's in. So at the 33-minute and 10-second mark, I'll start diving more meticulously into what the props are and why they're done in the exact way they're done, including how it can be cross-referenced onto what I already said, and additional information. So again, because the goal for me is to explain these things so you walk away with a pictorial image in your mind based on what you hear and based on what you discover through your research based on the descriptions I expose. So that 33-minute and 9-second mark is approaching right now. So let's just wait a second or two here.